I am Graham, a trucker who reads a lot of books. My goal is to be a full-time author and illustrator. You're helping me get there by watching this video, so thanks. Now on to the video. I had something really cool happen over the weekend. Last month, a nice lady from Kansas City reached out. She's a member of a chapter of Mayflower descendants. I'm not sure what the reach is for these groups nationwide, but they've got one there. And apparently, like, everybody in the group takes turns being in charge of a meeting every month, and they look up passengers that they're related to. It happens that she was related to Stephen Hopkins, and she was reading a book about him and looking up stuff on YouTube, and it so happens that the book she read was one that I reviewed 3 years ago when I was on a road trip for work in Pennsylvania. And because of that, she found the channel. She reached out and she's like, hey, I'm trying to find somebody who wants to talk to this group about the Mayflower. I was like, well, I happen to know a thing or two about that. And she said, like, yeah, just talk about whatever you want. And, if you wouldn't mind answering some questions. I said, sure. So we hammered out the details over the last couple of weeks, and Saturday was the day. And so without really having anything strictly planned out beforehand, I had a couple of notes on a pad in front of me. I did a Zoom call with this Kansas City group and just talked about who I was, how I got into this subject of interest, how in 2018 I started reading books from the library, and then I got an idea to write a goofy fantasy novel about the first Thanksgiving, and that sent me down this rabbit hole of research. And while I did do a first draft of that, and a couple of you guys listened to it when it was on the old podcast, ultimately I pulled it down because the more that I read about the Mayflower, the less I wanted to mess with it in a historical fiction context. I struggled with that because I still wanted to write a book like that, but I don't feel like I did the subject justice. So I did more and more reading, and every year when November rolls around, I'll read 2 or 3 more books about the Mayflower. It seems like there's no shortage of people doing research on it. And as a result, I ended up becoming pretty knowledgeable on the subject. And so I can talk about it nonstop for 20, 30 minutes. And I ended up reining myself in a little bit. You guys know how I like to ramble. But I threw my 2 cents in there and then kind of opened it up for questions, and we had a good chat. I think the most impactful question from the group was there was a lady who asked about if people tend to glaze over the fact that, in her words, that the Pilgrims killed Massasoit and put his head on a pike. And in the days since I did this Zoom call, I've been thinking about it. And I thought, like, I'm really glad that I read as much as I have, and that I wasn't just like BSing to some lady who emailed me and said, hey, you want to talk to our group, just so that I could feel important, saying, yeah, like, I'm glad that I actually knew what I was talking about here, and that I'd read as much as I did, because that equipped me to accurately answer her question. A couple of years ago, I wouldn't have even known what she was referring to. If you're unfamiliar, here's the skinny. Massasoit was the leader of the Indian tribe that helped the Pilgrims through that first year that they were there. And then they ended up having a great alliance and a good friendship for the next several decades. Unfortunately, that alliance fell apart in the 1670s. Things escalated, and then minor hostilities became open warfare. And in order to put an end to the warfare, it wasn't just a matter of like, oh, we've got to beat them militarily. It's like, we've got to stop them and send a message that they can never do this again. And so descendants of the original Pilgrims went to war with descendants of those Wampanoags from the 1620s. And the result was the Wampanoags lost, and their leader, who was not Massasoit, but was one of his sons, was killed and decapitated, and his head was put on a pike. And as I even said to the group, that's not something that will pop up in any Charlie Brown Thanksgiving specials, but it did happen at the end of that first generation of Pilgrims and Wampanoags getting along together. And I said, it's nice to have that elementary school vision of the first Thanksgiving and the Pilgrims helping each other and getting along. That didn't stay that way forever. They did have a great friendship and a great relationship for 50 years. It did eventually end. and it ended very badly. But as important as it is to remember history accurately, it is also important to remember how and why things happened the way that they did. And this is where I mentioned the book by Rebecca Fraser, which I read in 2022, and immediately it made my best of year list. And because that's the book that did, I think, the best job of objectively chronicling the first 50 years of Plymouth and explaining just how things went from friendly in the 1620s to open war in the 1670s. And she was fair, she didn't sugarcoat anything, and she was very straightforward about the myriad of causes that led to that. There's a kind of confidence that I had in giving that explanation that I've tended to not have in the past. I've presented at conferences before talking about writing and talking about the various fields of interest that I have. And there have been a couple of times when I got assigned to panels where I knew very little about the subject matter. And so I only weighed in when I felt like I actually had something to say. But life and experience and reading and all of that have given me a certain set of, maybe not expertise, but broad-backed knowledge, we'll say. And I was very relieved at being able to give the answer to the question that she was looking for, and hopefully she was satisfied by that. This is the kind of thing that I hope to be able to do as a result of my reading efforts. There's an Instagrammer that I have found. His name is Michael Kist, and he's a big-time reader like me. He's got a different methodology for it. He likes to do what he calls immersion reading. He'll buy the physical book and the audiobook, and he'll sit in his room for an hour with his phone out of reach, and he'll play the audiobook and read along with the print book at the same time so that he doesn't trail off and he stays zeroed in. And he'll sit down in front of the camera and he'll say, here's a list of books that I've read to educate myself on, say, the history of Egypt or Rome or this particular event or that. And he'll pull up 6 or 7 books. And to the average or casual reader, that will seem like a lot. It'll seem like really, really intense. But the more that I read, the more I realize that having read one book on a subject doesn't make you an expert on it, doesn't even really make you familiar with it. It's scratching the surface of it. I've read a bunch of Civil War books, but I wouldn't know as much about the Civil War as I do if I had only read, say, one biography of one figure in it. And I will still read many Civil War books before I die. I've read, I don't know, I probably have to count them up, close to a dozen Mayflower books at this point, and that forms the basis of an education that I am very proud of, but I would say is not over. Having that breadth and that comfort comes from knowing that you've put the effort in and that you're seeing results from it. Jana, the lady who reached out to me, she was very polite at the end of it and said, she was very complimentary. Polite makes it seem like she was reluctant. Like she was very, very nice at the end of all of it and said, hey, it'd be cool if you could find other chapters to talk to and make a side gig out of this. And I thought, that would be cool. But my hesitancy for that would be, I would hate to present myself as an expert because really at the end of the day, all I'm familiar with is research that other people have done. I've read Fraser, I've read Philbrick, I've read Turner, I've read Johnson, I've read a couple of other authors who have chronicled things. But really all I'm reading is their research. I'm not getting out there and doing original research of my own. That's just a consequence of me being a reader. And I do make sure to cite my sources when I'm talking about things like this, because I don't want to present it as like, these are things that I've gone out and found out. No, these are things that I've read, and that's different. Hopefully the things that are being written are the things that the author has gone and found out. And I'm grateful for their efforts because that is how we disseminate information from one to another. We can't be an expert on more than just a couple of things in our lifetimes. It takes a great amount of effort and focus and true deep knowledge to become an expert in anything. let alone more than one thing. And I wouldn't expect to become an expert in many things, but I would like to be very familiar with a lot of research and a lot of perspectives on various subjects. Just reading those different researchers who have written Mayflower books has shown me that uh, even people who have done that research can disagree on basic facts. The Pilgrim Hall Society, which made that poster that I have, lists John Howland's age as 28. But most other sources that I've seen list his birth year as 1599, making him 21 when they crossed. You'll find discrepancies between different sources, but that's why it's valuable to read multiple sources. And because I was able to talk at length about a subject that interests me. And as I said on the website, this happened in my favorite way, and that is to say, organically. I didn't have to force it. I didn't have to go like quickly look something up and then pretend like I knew what I was talking about. This was in line with the ethos that I have for myself, which is do what I would normally do anyway and sometimes point a camera at it. That's what I'm doing here. I will always be a reader, and I will always read what is of interest to me, and I will share it here with you guys. You're never going to catch me telling you to read a book that I haven't read myself, unless for some extraordinary reason I'm pimping a book and saying, by the way, I haven't read this, but I know the author, or I know it's in a series, or whatever. Like, I'm not going to lie to you guys here, because I like what I do. And I like feeling good enough in how I do it and why I do it, and knowing that I do it honestly. And through just doing that, just being a guy who reads and talks about books, somebody found me, reached out and said, hey, you want to talk to my group? And I got to, and had a great time. She was apologetic about the fact that she goes, I think there might be a speaker's fee, but I'm not sure. I said, it's cool. Don't worry about it. They did hook me up with an Amazon card, so I was able to finally get a print copy of Rebecca Fraser's book. I've got that on order. I listened to the audiobook, but it's been on my list to eventually add to my library, and now I finally get to, as a result of talking about it to this group. But I have optimism for the continued growth of this channel and the work that I'm doing here, and maybe I will get to do something like this full-time down the road. I'm not going to force it. I'm not going to lose sleep over it. I'm just going to keep doing what I do until it grows and I can turn it into something else. I think back to an interview that I read years and years ago. This was probably when the Twilight books were at the height of their popularity. And this isn't an endorsement or denunciation of the quality of those books. That's all in the eye of the beholder. Nobody can argue with Stephenie Meyer's sales. But before those books really took off, she got her contract, she got it published, and she got to go to a local bookstore with some friends and some known readers in just a small group of them, and she got to read chapters from her work and get feedback, and she said that those were her favorite moments. I think we would all like to have the monetary success of somebody at that level, but there are things that you give up in order to have that. You lose a lot of your privacy and a lot of your personal time when you have that level of fame. I think it kind of makes it hard for you to remain a normal Joe in a lot of situations. I would like to have that level of monetary success, but maybe not all the baggage that comes along with it, and maybe not while I have minor children at home. So who knows? My friend Adam put it best. He goes, the great thing would be to be an international superstar, like abroad, and to be completely unknown in the homeland. It's like, yeah, maybe I ought to start recording videos in Spanish then. But anyway, I had a great time talking to that group this weekend, and doing stuff like that is it's just a net positive of doing what I would be doing anyway. It's a little benefit that comes at the end of it. And that's why I'm going to keep reading on different subjects and keep sharing stuff with you guys, because I want to reach more and more people as I go. So, thank you. Thank you for watching that. To help the channel, check out my books on Amazon. Buy one, read it, tell me what you think. For October, I recommend Sleepless Hollow, a fantastic sci-fi romp with guns, ghosts, and gonzo action sequences. You can also subscribe to my Substack, where I do more detailed book reviews and longer running projects, some of which is paywalled. Drive safe. See you out there.